Hello and welcome to the Fellowship Phase, an Adventures in Middle-earth podcast. I'm Josh and that's Callum. We're going to give you inside information on how to find your own path through Tolkien's world.
At the foot of the lonely mountain lies Dale, the great city of men in the north. Ever the close allies of the dwarves of Erebor, Dale was a place of peace and trade known far and wide. That was until the coming of Smaug and the desolation wrought. Now, with the dragon dead in the lake, Dale is rebuilding, and many labour with hands, hearts, and minds in this endeavour.
Hello, Callum, and for this evening, hello, James.
Hello, James.
Hello, me.
How are you both doing?
Good.
Are you looking forward to a deep dive into your character, James? That's what we're here for.
I have been looking forward to this since you first proposed the podcast that you two would be hosting it, and a fine job of you have both been doing so far.
Thank you.
If I may say.
Thank you.
And suggested you might be having some guests on. So yes, been very much looking forward to it.
Good. And Callum, the narrative segment leads us in nicely. What will we be talking about besides simply James's character?
Well, we'll be introducing James's character, and I'll leave that to James to do. And as part of that, the introduction was about Dale, because James's character is, drum roll, a barding, or a man of Dale, as they're called.
Indeed, my character, who been playing now for over 2 years, I think that's right. No, definitely right. I know that's right.
Over 2 years? That's wild.
Yes. My character is Torwald, son of Farald, honorary member of the Royal Guard of Dale, hero of the Woodman, elf friend, Hornbreaker, and known as Lightfoot among the dwarves for reasons we will get into later.
I absolutely love how many titles he has, and that you can remember them.
I can't remember them. I was looking at them on a piece of paper. No, I wasn't. That's a lie. It was a Word document. I just wanted to make it sound more like old worldy.
It worked. For people listening, recently the party visited Rivendell and were being introduced to Elrond. At this point, had been playing for 2 years, and between us had accumulated a lot of titles. The party had a title, and Callum, as the lawmaster, said in character, when you're introduced to Lord Elrond, tell me what your titles are so I can introduce you properly. And I think all of us immediately forgot all of the cool titles that we'd accumulated. And I was like, Halmir? Shrug my shoulders, I don't know. I'm glad that you've remembered, because we've got some cool titles we can come on to.
Well, I mean, Torwald and audiences is a thing that's actually gone back to relatively early in the game.
Yes.
With the early encounters with Beorn, where I think we did play a bit with Torwald coming from this as slightly like, well, you know, Beorn's like a lord and he should be treated appropriately, while Beorn views things differently. And I think that was one of the early interesting culture clashes that not dramatic, not a source of actual conflict, but that I thought added some nice texture to the world, and obviously interacted with those audience rules that you were talking about on whichever episode it was, and the hidden from us players expectations and the motivations of the patrons who you might meet, and such powerful folk as that.
So yeah, Torwald's been with us right from the beginning. He was one of our starter characters. Am I right in thinking he was your first ever roleplay character that you made?
Not exactly.
Oh.
Almost. He's the first one I've played, I'm going to say, successfully.
What does that mean?
So I'm going to say it must have been like 20 years ago. I was on holiday in the States, visiting my cousin, and my brother and I, or my cousin suggested, let's play D&D. And my brother and I
Amazing.
were like, sure, we're nerds, let's do that. And he roped in his friend to DM. And funnily enough, my first character was a half-elf druid. I think everyone goes through a half-elf druid phase, to be honest.
Yep, I think so.
And we got 5 minutes into the game, and Richard, my brother, said something that annoyed Jared, and basically led to us instantaneously being all killed by lightning. And that was the end. It was the most classic rocks, short of actual rocks falling, everyone dying. Most classic DM is annoyed, going to kill you all. And that was the end of any of my forays into tabletop role-playing games for 20 years, essentially.
Well, after 20-year gap, created Torwald. And so far, we've not annoyed the lore master enough for Roxfall, or at least any of the things that could be considered to be Roxfall kill the party. I'm
slightly suspicious of the number of 5-foot gaps he's put in, personally.
Could we talk about then, and I really enjoyed talking with Stuart about the process of creating Runin, his dwarf character. Could we talk about the kind of mechanical process that you went through to create Torvald? So, like, what was your starting point for him as a character? Where did you start with as an idea?
I think I started with what would be an interesting character for me to explore this world with.
Okay, yeah.
And obviously, I'm a big Tolkien fan, quite a lot of familiarity. I like the idea of playing a character who shares that in some way. And I mean, there is that old line that your first real D&D character or first real hobby character is sort of just a version of yourself. After that, you branch out a bit more, but it is often the case that one gravitates to a similar type, an archetype that matches. So saw Scholar and was like, yeah, that seems right. I have a PhD in real life. Let's play a Scholar. That was
it does fit very neatly.
That was a factor, if I'm honest. But I didn't want it to be like he's someone who. So this is one of the early choices I made. Is settled on Scholar first, I think. Where should he be from? Where does it make sense for a Scholar to be from? Especially since we knew we were starting in the mysterious town of Lake Town, the origins of whose name is lost
in the
mists of time.
We'll never know.
Knew we were starting at Lake Town. And my initial instinct was Minas Tirith is where the scholars probably are in Middle-earth. But having a character from Minas Tirith at the start of the game, and obviously your second character, Josh, is not from Minas Tirith, but it's from Gondor.
Yeah.
I think introducing that later worked, but I think having a character from Gondor at level 1...
I know exactly what you mean.
Just feels or felt... Not that it couldn't work, but it wasn't the vibe I was aiming for.
It being so far from home in such a different setting implies that there had been adventure already for them to have got there. The idea of starting out in your adventuring life hundreds of miles from home in a completely foreign land seems unlikely. I know exactly what you mean.
Precisely. So then I thought it's probably Lake Town or Dale then. I mean, I could have gone with a Dwarven Scholar, could have gone with a Scholar of Mirkwood, which I did draft out what that would look like as one of my dozens of backup characters that I tend to be my stress release valve when things are looking dire for the party. But I think I wanted to stick with that ordinariness. And so the thought occurred to me, if you grew up in a lake town, and this is obviously, it is well established, AIM tends to begin 5 years after Smaug destroys Old Lake Town. So I was thinking, okay, this is someone who's grown up in Old Lake Town, whether they're Barding or a man of Lake Town, and grown up with stories of Dale. And maybe on a clear day, you could see across the long lake and see just at the edge of sight the ruins of the old city. And that image is the core of the character for me. That idea of looking north, and of course looking north does have some significance in Tolkien, and I think that will come into more discussion of that later. But looking north and seeing the faded glories of the past.
I love it.
It sounds like a journey event.
Does a little bit, doesn't it? Now you say that.
It fits so well with the game. I don't think you've ever said that to me before. That's really interesting.
Scholar was a natural fit then for you. It made sense. Was it a natural fit after you'd read the whole class? Like, were you aware of the features and stuff? Or was it just, you saw Scholar, the idea's there, you'll take the mechanics as they come?
The latter. And
That's
I
really
think that to some extent is because it's very important for this conversation to establish that I had no idea what I was doing when I made Torwald.
Yes, as you've mentioned to me numerous times since, which is funny because I feel like it's not an offense to say, and it's just true, but James is probably of our group the person who now puts the most time and thought into making characters that will work well, what you may call metagamer. Is that the right word? Power gamer? I'm not sure how you would describe it.
I would say more of a power gamer than a meta game. I'm not saying I don't occasionally slip into metagaming either, but I think what you're describing there is more power gaming. Not because I want to be better than anyone else, but just because I like to create characters who are good at doing things. Yeah. That is.
I get it, and I'm the same. I think we're maybe not to the same extent. I tend to go for like a really silly, same. I go for a really silly idea, and then just try and make it as ridiculous as possible. I still want to get that halfling mounted on a dog or something, character out, the cavalier thing. Basically, it's like a puzzle, isn't it? When you've got an RPG and you're building a character, and how do you make the mechanics work in a strange way or a powerful way? That's a puzzle. But obviously, we, as you said, you didn't have any experience. So we'll maybe come on to that later on and ask you what you might have done differently, which is probably
that's the best place to talk about that.
Quite a few things. And there was an and. I didn't know where I was going. I was trying to end the sentence.
The 5-foot gap conversations.
Watching you audibly approach the 5-foot gap, unsure if you'll make it to the other side.
We can say that the 5-foot gap thing is specifically because Torwald has a strength of 8, which means he has -2 to strength, which means that I believe, according to the established D&D rules of how far you can jump without having to roll a strength check, which again he's bad at, is something like half your overall strength score. So he can only jump 4-foot gaps.
Oh yeah. There's been quite a few times where it's been like epic heroic challenge and adventure, conquering this tower, and there's a small gap, we're fucked.
Right, and because on any battle map, if there's like a square or a tile, it's just like there's a gap, there's just one tile, but that means it's 5 feet.
It's always 5 feet.
It's going to be 5 feet.
Yeah, it's strange.
It's exactly 1 foot longer than he can jump comfortably. I don't know if we got that calculation correct. Again, we didn't really know what we were doing when we started doing this, so maybe we should revisit and make sure we have that rule down correct.
It's one of those rules, and there's a lot of rules like this. We were talking about this last night when we were playing Crest of Strahd, which Josh is running for us, which is excellent. And what we were talking about all the different detect good and evil and find all these spells which are kind of similar. And Josh was saying that he needed to understand and memorize them, and I was like, nope, just read it every time, because I think there's some rules in D&D which it's worth committing to memory and an aim, and there's some things it's worth just saying we're going to look it up every time and
just memorize the
jumping rules. Where are you going to find it? Have you got a DM screen, or and that's again, that's a bit of a lore master thing for this, is that I know where all the rules are, but I don't know what they all are, and I have got like little lists of things that come up quite commonly that I refer to a lot. So anyway, that's a sidebar. Shoot.
We know that Torvald's not good at jumping across gaps, but he is good at lots of things. What are his, looking back at the beginning, what were his kind of starting core abilities? And now, having played for quite a long time, what are the ones that he regularly does? What's his kind of role in the party?
His most consistent role in the party has been Lookout, which is obviously a specific function within the journey rules. He is almost always the Lookout because he has high perception as well as high intelligence, because, again, to reiterate, I did not know what I was doing. So he's always been the Lookout. And he's always tended to be the one who's both focused and able to figure out what is going on. I see that as his function within the party. He's the one who investigates. He's the investigator.
He is the brains of the operation.
He is, to some extent, the brains of the operation, not in the sense of being the mastermind, but in the sense of being the one who provides context. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What will it accomplish in the big picture? I think is something he thinks a lot about. One title he would like to add to his list of titles is co-founder of NORTO, the North Ravanian Treaty Organization.
I forgot about that.
I am never going to forget about it.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Going to keep coming back. I'm going to make it happen.
A big part of Scholar as a class, and I say this as someone who was a Scholar to begin with, and we had a lot of overlap with our class, is that's where the healing mechanic in the game is, which is smaller than it is in a lot of role-playing games. There's no magical healing as such, but the Scholar has healing abilities. Now, Theodric was with the party in our early journeys, and he was much more focused on being a healer, so he kind of fulfilled the healer role, but he retired, and then that burden kind of fell to Torwald. How do you feel about that?
That sounds like that was a very journalist. How do you feel about that, Josh? Is what that sounded like.
I don't know why I sound like that. I don't know what possibly has given the impression that that's how I would ask a question.
It is interesting. It's absolutely interesting to me that, to some extent, because we had weirdly two scholars to start with, Theodric was able to be the healer in a very specific way. Whereas I think if Theodric hadn't been around, Torwald might have been pushed into that role earlier, and that might have defined him earlier on. I think it's more interesting that he didn't actually have to be the healer. He certainly wasn't the combat healer in the early stages of the game. And I also think that contrast was helpful early on for defining who Torwald was, because, of course, as you talked about, Theodric is this worldly man in the sense of having experienced much of the world.
I really wanted to talk to you about this because I certainly felt from playing Theodric that we didn't know what we were doing, I suppose, and we didn't really coordinate our party. So, and I know some players like to do that and they plan out who's going to fulfill which role. We didn't. And because of that, we did end up with, in our case, two scholars. Also, we ended up with two Bjornings, me and Scott, who plays Karhu. So there's a lot of overlap. I think naturally our two characters were quite different in how we envisaged them, but I certainly felt role-playing Theodric, having another scholar who had an identity, helped me define who Theodric was, because I was like, well, Torwald is young and Theodric's older. How would he approach things? And I liked that our characters kind of bounced off each other and helped define each other. Did you have the same experience?
Exactly the same. I'm remembering, I don't know if I would call this one of my favorite Torwald moments exactly, but with the City of the Aethed, when we essentially had completed what we were there to do, but we found a cave that definitely had a troll in it. And Theodric's response was, "There's a troll, let's leave." Whereas Torwald's response was, it wasn't a cave, it was the entranceway to a tomb.
Yeah.
Which must have been full of wonders of the people of the Aethed, and there was knowledge to be uncovered there. And we might find out more of the world if we just take a look and also fight a troll when Runin nearly died. But I mentioned because it was, I think, a good illustration of here were two characters who are both of the same class, who are both among the party, among the more cerebral,
Yeah.
but nevertheless are coming from very different places.
Imagine how different the campaign, if Runan had died there, imagine how different the campaign had been, because he did come pretty close. I think he got knocked out in like
very close.
one hit or something. It was
death saving throws for Runan, and it was early on, and we did have both of us as scholars, so we had healing abilities. But because we were both scholars, we didn't really have much combat ability. Our party was quite light on combat ability, and facing the troll was pretty tough at that time. And I think as we've established, Runan's a bit of a superhero. Without him, I don't know if we would have made our way through the wilds as much as we have.
Maybe I can ask a bit more about the barding, like going through when you're creating the character. So we've touched on, maybe we'll come to the ability score spread, because I think that's one of the interesting parts of Torwald, which defines him in a way. And I know that, you know, it makes some parts of the game, like combat, very difficult. But
one of my favorite moments is the combat moment, though. We'll get to it.
Oh, exciting. So bardings, what do bardings get?
Bardings, I have the book in front of me. I have the Adventures in Middle-earth Player's Guide.
One of the few people with the...
I've probably got one of the last copies.
I know, look after it. These things are going to be... well, they are worth a lot of money.
It's worth a lot of money.
They are.
So Bardings. Bardings get, in terms of mechanics, an extra constitution and 2 additional ability score points. Which is fairly typical, I think, for humans in this game.
Yeah.
The most notable thing is, apart from the standard cultural virtue, is a proficiency in the insight skill. So with a high wisdom, that also means that Torwald is pretty good at some aspects of social encounters as well. Has at least a couple of useful things he can put. He's also good at traditions. So although that was something we changed, we did go back and Callum change a couple of things.
Really? I don't know if I knew about that.
So one of the things he was initially proficient in history, and what we decided was it made more sense if he was proficient in traditions, because that meant he would be knowledgeable about things happened in more recent history and contemporary customs. And then what I liked the idea of as I played it a bit more was it doesn't really make sense for him to like know the legends of the second or first age yet. He's just starting out. So what I like the idea of is swapping out history for traditions, and then there is a scholar class feature.
Well, later on, you can pick up a proficiency, and we thought thematically that would be better. And I think this is a good example of when people are starting out, particularly if you've not done name before. Like, you know, you've written it down, but it's not set in stone. So if you find that the character develops and the rules don't fit the character, and then change what the pick was, the rules, like, I have no issue with that at all.
Yeah.
You know, I guess if it's like someone trying to just directly get more powerful, but I can't imagine anybody would want to do that.
I mean, I did want more proficiencies, Callum.
I know, but when it's a genuine mistake, like, oh, I didn't realize that if I got to level up,
yes,
and then
if I
history
had understood better these things, but it does betray my slight tendencies towards. That was a word I want to use that sounds best, makes it sound better than it is. Never mind. It'll occur to me later.
I think we're being quite down on this as a sort of player style, and I think that's unreasonable. People enjoy the game in different ways.
Yeah.
I think enjoying the game because you have a character who's good at things, and then you do the things that you're good at. It's not a bad thing.
I just want to collect. I just want to, as told, I want to collect proficiencies like Pokemon. Anyway.
Would you say you would like to be the very best?
Yes. Yes. The best there ever was.
Okay.
The other thing we swapped around was distinctive quality, but we can come back onto that later.
I feel we need to talk about it now.
Or we could talk about it now.
You've piqued my interest now. What was the distinctive quality? Why did it change?
I rolled for it.
Okay.
Initially, because I couldn't decide, so I just rolled for it. It's like a D6, and I got determined. And then over time, what I found is that it made it harder for Torwald to drop things. So I swapped it for curious, which felt like actually a more characterful aspect. Like it seemed more specific to Torwald that he was curious.
I really like that.
So we're doing this in a funny order.
We're doing this. I've ruined everything.
No, it's fine. So we did the class. You said that you chose the class first, so we're going to the class last. So we've done the culture, which was Barding, and now we're moving to the background. So Seeker of the Lost is the...
Okay, we can do that now. We can come back to virtues later, I suppose.
Because distinctive quality, just for people that weren't sure what that is. So when you choose a background, you get 3 things. You get, that's not right. You get 4 things. You get a distinctive quality, a speciality, a hope, and a despair.
Yes.
And
I don't think I rolled for all of them. I think I just rolled for the first one, which is a D8, and to try and get more definition to the character, because I wasn't sure what direction I want to take the character in. But then once I was more sure, then I was like, actually, let's edit this, I suppose.
There's a thing, like it says on the page that you're one thing and you role play it a different way. And so does it really matter what's on the page? But it can be helpful if you're unsure in a situation, like how you would react, to come back to these suggested characteristics. And I think that they do a good job in the background of giving you something to base it on. To be honest, when I'm making a character, I don't really ever roll on tables. In D&D, for example, if there's a background feature, I just choose. I don't roll.
I usually do too. Again, I think it was because this was my first real character in 20 years or ever, arguably. So I rolled, I don't know if I rolled for each of them. I can't remember that. I definitely rolled for distinctive quality, I think. And then I think I also rolled for specialty, because that's what gave me my Dark Secrets specialty, which is...
that where it came from?
Which I think is where that came from.
Oh, I did not realize that.
That's a big part of your character now.
Which is a big part of what's shaped Torwald and his focus.
Which is?
Drum roll.
Shadow Law.
Shadow Law, which is going to be the next episode.
Which is going to be the next episode.
Did you just do an advert for our own podcast in the middle of our own podcast live?
Do you like Adventures in Middle-earth? Or have you listened to the Fellowship podcast? It's the new podcast everyone's talking about on
Around the water cooler.
We're recording a glut of episodes in advance of going live, and James was part of our special preview audience, which was the people who play the game. And so
the captive audience that we have.
So yes, maybe there's been feedback so far, which has been like.
Talk a bit about Dark Secrets then. What does that mean mechanically? What was the starting point with that mechanically? And then maybe we could talk a bit about how that's grown for Torwald.
Well, I don't think the special, because the Dark Secrets is just the specialty, which I don't think has a mechanical effect, strictly speaking. It's thematic choice, I believe, with any of the specialties, right, Callum? And if you decide as Lawmaster that maybe on occasion it might provide some additional benefits, then I think the Lawmaster is entitled to do whatever he or she wants to do.
Whatever they want. Carte blanche.
Whatever they want to do. But I don't think it has mechanical benefit. But Scholar class has 2 specialties, which are subclasses. So Master Healer is what Thudrik was.
Indeed.
While Torwald was a Master Scholar. And as a Master Scholar, you get so-called secret laws. And the first of these secret laws that I took as Torwald was Dark Knowledge, which does have a specific mechanical effect. For one thing, you learn the Black Speech of Mordor.
It's quite intense for level 1.
Well, it's not level 1.
Level 3?
It's level 3.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then
fine,
you've been on the road a few months, fine.
Well, it was specifically after we went to scout the Drummerhorn.
It was. Yeah, we'd had a real
actually, it kind
dark
of worked.
encounter.
Yeah, we managed to work in a narrative segment that would link to. Sort
It's
of.
a bit of a stretch. It was a bit of a stretch, but it sort of made sense.
Yeah.
It made sense as much as visions in Tolkien sometimes can come at a significant moment.
It made more sense than if you had gone to sleep one day and then woke up and were like, I can now speak the black speech of Mordor, which some level ups can feel a little like that.
Yes, the fact that, again, the fellowship phase, hey, that's the name of the show, mechanic.
Yes, I'm always there for an Arrested Development reference. Thank you.
Because of the fellowship phase mechanic, usually you're leveling up with or after fellowship phase, so it does feel like there's been time for things to happen, which is a thing that I like about this game in particular. But Dark Knowledge gives you black speech and Mortor. There were still words in there.
It gives you the black speech of, where's that now? Lake Town?
Mortstar.
And you can make ability checks about information regarding the shadow and its followers without penalty. Additionally, if you do not already possess it, gain proficiency with shadow lore.
There we go. Okay.
And you also got skill proficiencies in lore and investigation from Secret of the Lost. So we're really ticking off the proficiencies here.
Yes. And then when you learn the secret, you gain 4 shadow points.
Do you actually?
Yes.
Which is a lot.
I did not know this had happened.
That's because that fellowship phase, I took the option to remove shadow points and immediately
Balance it
out.
I didn't even know it was on the table. I didn't know that, internally Torwald was struggling with this darkness as he was developing.
That's why he wrote the poem.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's
I was like, if I'm going to
curtain.
do this slightly metagamey thing, taking this law, the secret law that gives you shadow points, but then I'm going to take a fellowship undertaking. I was like, fellowship activity? That doesn't sound very Tolkien. It sounds like a summer camp.
Activity is not a Tolkien world.
Which poem was that?
The Black Hour.
Ah, I've got that here.
Yes.
It was very good. Maybe we can release that somewhere.
Yes.
It's very good.
All 4 pages of it.
I know. I think
like 1 page for every point you lost.
Yeah, I feel like I earned that drop in shadow points, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, if you hadn't written a 4-page poem, I wouldn't have given you the drop in shadow points. So.
Exactly. It all made sense.
So in the class, there's a lot of things that are building up here to paint a picture of Torwald as this expert in knowledge, and then someone who delves into shadow lore. And I think just for like a lore master insight there, there's a couple of other things. So the Secret of the Lost has an ability when you hear of a ruin for the first time, you usually know a bit of information about it. And scholars in general have news from afar, which allows them to have tidings. So they get sort of rumors and so on. And so I often found myself preparing long lists of rumors, and I had like reference sheets of various things that were going on that I drew from the books, which I could drop in. Maybe I'll ask a question about that now, and then I'll say the next thing that I want to say. How did you find that? Because I don't know. When I have a list of rumors and I drop them in conversations, did that feel natural? Because I didn't want to be like, I use my news from afar ability. The news from afar has arrived. There is something going on in the mountains of Mirkwood.
Can I answer your question with another question?
Okay.
Was there ever a rumor that we just seized way too eagerly that there was nothing to it?
Yes.
And you were just like, why did they keep coming back to this?
Yes.
Which one was it?
There was a rumor about like...
I think I know which one it was, but...
Yeah. Do you want to say?
Is it the one about woodman children being stolen, or woodman being kidnapped?
Yeah.
But particularly from the eaves of Mirkwood.
Yes. I won't explain what that was, but...
I know what it was.
Okay, yes. So
I don't know if I knew what it was.
maybe
I think I know what it was.
We can just
I say it very...
So, but in the lore at that time, Smeagol Gollum is around, and he's known to travel through Mirkwood. So there's a thing in the one of the books is called the Mirkwood Campaign. It's got a timeline, and in that time, it mentions this as happening. And I was like, oh, that's a great rumor. And then you're like, well, we have to go sort this out. We'll have to go and do it. And I'm like, no, they can't go.
See, what we do is
destroy the cannon of us hunting Gollum.
We go hunt and kill Gollum, and then do Middle Earth. And Frodo becomes Dark Lord.
The second thing I wanted to say about these information, I guess, giving things, and actually Scholar in general, which I think is a challenge for Scholar, and more so than the others, is that it's sometimes hard to think, how did they come by, when you got the Shadow Lore thing, how did they come by that knowledge? Or like lore proficiency. Like if you're not from Minas Tirith, whereas Minas Tirith, I feel like, you could be in the library of Minas Tirith and there's records there. If you come from Dale, how do you draw that in? I think James and I have come to an understanding and a solution later on in the game, which actually is sort of retrospectively, I'm not going to say what that is, I don't think Josh knows, but we have come up with a way of tying that into the lore. Do you have anything to add to that, James?
I would like to read a small passage from the book.
The good book?
In the beginning, no. The most important thing to keep in mind when creating your scholar is to think of where and how you gained your knowledge.
Oh.
Did you study under a master, learning as an apprentice? Is your scholar a dabbler, flitting from one obsession to another? Or do you learn all there is to know about one field of lore before moving on? It's really the first half that I wanted to highlight, which is to say, this is just to note that that's something the book raises. And I made potentially the challenging choice, not really very consciously, that Torwald would be something of an autodidact, that he would be voraciously reading, and then we had to just figure out where these books were coming from, and therefore invented the Royal Library of Dale to try and explain where there would be books for him to read, and then he would be involved with the building, and then he would also have helped organize it at some point. That was his equivalent of undergraduate study, essentially, that he was just in the library, ostensibly helping out, but really doing a lot of reading of the books.
Yeah, I love that part of your backstory. And we were just talking about this before we started recording, that when they went to Dale as a party much later on, it was really great for me because James had came up with a list of NPCs that he knew in Lake Town and Dale, and weaving them into the plot. And, it's sometimes difficult to get a vision, if someone gives you an NPC to pop in. And, James has done this really well in games that that you've run and I've played in. Not so much like direct, but like, just in he's nodding his head. So the Royal Library was great because, in the book, there's not really a thing. And so we come up with this, their mentor, who was a stonemason called Hepti, who was this dwarf, and that kind of explained your link to the dwarves. And then the librarian, Lomond, who is a really great NPC. And I guess episodes wise, we could one day come back and do some deep dives into different places and some NPCs that we've come up with. And they're two of the highlight ones, I think.
Yes, I very much like having some focus to imagining characters, which the way I tend to do that is I like to actually I like to cast them. I like to pick an actor and be like, this actor matches, not necessarily exactly what I think the character looks like, but has the right energy or, well, vibe.
Vibe check.
That's vibe check. And so, which I should have mentioned earlier, because actually very early on, I cast Timothy Chalamet in my head as to be Torwald, which sort of helped me define what made Torwald actually different from me. There's a different vibe. And similarly with the NPCs that I thought made sense for Torwald to have had around him growing up and through his self-education. So I think so Lomond, who I think is your favorite one to play, Callum, I cast as Ben Mendelsohn, and you just saw that I made that suggestion. You were like, I know who this character is. I know exactly his attitude and his complex mixture of appreciation for Torwald's help while also being really, really irritated, having this annoying, precocious young man kind of taking up space and reordering the books in the way that he thinks is best, or whatever else.
There was a very significant narrative segment in that library late in the game where they were uncovering some lore and a load of stuff about Talisker, which is a language that Tolkien wrote about, which was a sort of ancient language of Ravanian and men. And that was very important. And I really enjoyed sort of bringing that character in and getting like kind of behind the scenes about how their interaction was. And I guess that reflects our game, which is often there is more role play. Because I think, the game is designed, you do an adventure phase and then you just go off and say, I do the fellowship phase and blah, blah, blah. And maybe there's some role play around that, but we tend to expand that out a bit more and are so invested in the characters and story that it ends up being quite a lot of role play in the fellowship phase sometimes, which is great because that's some of the most fun times that we've had.
I've absolutely loved hearing about this because I did not know that the Royal Library of Dale isn't canon. I didn't know that this was something that you'd made up, and that to me it was like the bits that you introduced, James, and the bits that are in the canon and that Callum manages as Lawmaster have kind of connected seamlessly. I didn't know that some of it was your backstory, and when we went, it just all felt like part of the story. I really like that it's a collaborative story that we tell, and that in different parts, we've all done that, I think, to an extent. But to the other players, I didn't know that was the case. I didn't know which of them were characters you had yourself created as part of Torwald and which ones were just part of the texture of the role play that we were doing.
Yes, the Witch King of Angmar is actually part of Brendan's backstory, and actually Tolkien created the Witch King of Angmar for Brendan's character.
Oh my God. How did you know? I have loved the journey because actually we did that quite early on and James came to me with that. And then I think there's been some characters along the way where I haven't really dialogued with the players enough, but the two most recent characters to join the party, I think I've sort of taken on that model of having dialogue with the player, weaving them into the story, building NPCs, building connections, and building them into the story. Because I guess as a in D&D, sometimes I found it difficult to connect people to the world when you haven't connected the world to them. So it's almost, when you're world building, make that link right when they make the character and be involved and get inside the player's head and know everything, but then don't reveal that to their players, which is great that you didn't realize that was not part of the canon, Josh. So that's good.
And I was excited when we visited the Royal Library of Dale because in-game, Torwald had spoken about it as an important part of your upbringing and where you were from. And it was exciting as a player to then go and be like, oh, this is, where Torwald's from. This is his neighborhood and stuff. It's cool that was something that you wrote from scratch with Callum.
Again, it came out of necessity because there needed to be an explanation for where would Torwald have done all this reading. There would be probably private collections in Lake Town. This is something that Callum and I talked about, actually, I think at one point. This idea that in Lake Town, everything would be more in the possession of the merchant princes.
Yeah.
While in Dale, there is maybe it's one of the things to maybe go back to that earlier point. What is different about do we actually talk about this in the recording, or was it just before the recording? It was just before the recording. Well, it was still earlier and it still happened, even if it was off the air. So Callum and I were talking about what is different about Bardings versus Men of Lake Town. And I think two things came up. One is that it's actually not that different between Bjornings and Woodman, which is not something that had occurred to me before. But again, it's the general population and then the group who follow a leader who says we can do things differently, whether it's don't know how you describe what Bjorn's project is, if he has a project, but it's fascinating for a number of reasons. Maybe that's something you can talk about with Scott when Scott comes on. But King Bardolph obviously offers this vision of a restored community that creates a deeper connection to the other cultures in the area at the same time. So merchant princes in Lake Town have possession of the valuable objects, including knowledge. Whereas in Dale, there is more of a collective sense of purpose, potentially. And that those who choose to go to Dale, there is something both idealistic and romantic with a capital R about the project of rebuilding Dale.
It's almost like in The Expanse, the Martians.
Almost like in The Expanse, the Martians. Yes,
I'm popped into my head right now.
I am into that comparison. Lake Town is the United Earth, and Dale is the Martians.
Right. We have to do Expanse comparisons. No. So we talked through, when we talked about Theodric, a little bit about the scholar path, but I don't know how much in detail we talked about things. I was reading through the rules again. There's some things I'm like, often when I read through the rules, I'm like, oh, did we forget about that ability? Like the 5th level ability for scholars, Webs of Deceit.
Yeah, I don't forget about it. It is probably one of those cases, because I think it's once per long rest. It might be one of those cases where I'm always, is this the time to use it? No, it's not one per long rest, but it's at the start of any interaction, so you have to.
Right, you can make an insight check against a DC of 15 plus a target's wisdom modifier. So
it's also very hard.
If successful at any point in the conversation, you gain advantage on one skill check for your scholarship and preparation.
That good.
For a 5th level ability, it's not
amazing.
It's hardly a cornerstone ability of the class.
Yeah.
The scholarly inspiration die you get level 6, I use more often.
Yeah, you use that very well.
That has come up a few times, just as whenever we stack a roll in our favor as much as possible.
Yeah, you end up with like a warden inspiration dice, a scholarly inspiration dice, and a fellowship dice, and a song dice sometimes. There's lots of different dice you can get from fellowship phases and from singing songs. Singing songs is very fun. So should we talk? Because we could go through all the extra scholarly abilities, but most of them unlock after 6th level. Sixth level, you can get more conditions recovered with your Hands of a Healer. Level 11, you become aware of secret paths, and so you can give advantage to people in journey rolls. 13th, you can make preparation in advance. And you can
this one.
Yeah, this one's cool. So it's a bit like Blades in the Dark, I guess, in that you have the pre-prepared, I think they're called dice, coins even, where you basically say like, earlier I did blah, 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 and prepared in advance.
Have you, either or both of you, seen the Doctor Who Red Nose Day parody, The Curse of Fatal Death?
I have not.
I've not seen that.
It's on YouTube. You should watch it. It was written by Stephen Moffat way before Doctor Who even came back from cancellation. But one of the things, there's this game of one-upmanship between the Doctor and the Master, where they're always saying, well, I went back earlier in time and already preempted the thing that you did when you went back earlier in time. And this makes me think of that a little bit. It's like, well, the thing you didn't know is.
Talk to me about this. I'm fascinated because this, as a mechanic in Blades in the Dark, is fascinating and actually hinges on the whole structure of it as a game that encourages and allows for heists. There's also a comparable mechanic in Alien, which I love, and I'd like to know how this works, because I rarely read ahead class-wise. I approach characters in a very specific way. I don't think, what am I going to be in 10 levels time? I just, when we level up, I investigate what comes next. Because I retired as Theodric, I never read this far in the Scholar class. So this is genuinely news to me.
It's level 13 and it's called Hope Unlooked For.
Would you like to read it out, Callum? Or shall I read it out?
You read it out.
If you're sure. At 13th level, you already messed it up. At 13th level, you may make preparations in advance and only reveal them when the time is right. Once per adventuring phase, you may activate this ability and describe actions you took in the past that were unknown to the rest of the player heroes, but that have now come to light. You must then make a suitable skill check to determine how successful these preparations were. The lore master is entitled to veto any unreasonable suggestions.
The eagles are coming. I sent them word.
Love it. Because this is a mechanic which exists in other games, which is largely absent from 5e and the various spin-off games thereof, including AIM. In Alien, which I will make my regular shout out to Free League's Alien RPG, which is amazing. One of the talents that you can have, which are special features each character gets, is called Hidden Stash. And rather than having any abilities or meaningful mechanics, all it says is that you have a hidden stash from the beginning of the game, which you don't need to decide what it is. And at a narrative moment, you can just choose what is hidden in your stash. And people reveal it at a key moment, and it might be a special weapon or something secretive or a tool that you need to save in that moment. And what I like is it's a secret the player has, and then it makes you feel very powerful in the moment because narratively it makes sense that your character can answer the problem. And I think it's really cool that it exists in other RPGs, and I did not know it existed in this. So this is very exciting to me.
I guess it answers that thing of it feels like sometimes there's situational abilities or rules that never really come up. And this is something that it can just cover that. You know, if you've got a thing where like you've got a hidden screwdriver in Alien, you know, that may never be relevant. But by giving the player the ability to be creative with it. And I also like that it says you can veto it. It's quite vague, I would say, this rule. They give some examples like, I found this ancient map on another adventure and I reveal it now. Or, I sent word to our allies in Rohan a week ago and they're going to arrive to bolster our defenses just before the orcs attack. You know, there's a challenge there when someone uses this ability for both the player and the lore master to make that fit and work. And I think if someone, when you get to that point, James, or if we get to that point, hopefully, I think if you were going to use that at some point, and maybe we could talk about it briefly before and then bring it in or something like that.
I would just like to read out the other examples because I think they get better as they go along. I guessed the king would imprison us, which is why I braved the jailer a week ago to hide a key behind this loose brick.
That's inspired.
Then the final one is, I just happened to bring along these fireworks.
They are hilarious.
Well, I love this. I'm really glad we're talking about this. I think there's an interesting difference between the Alien RPG and this, which is that with this, we have a very comprehensive, long-running campaign, which you've built up an established world and added even more texture to it. And it's very intricate, and we all understand how it works, which I think makes this ability a little challenging because it kind of pushes the realism of the world that we've done lots of other preparations, and the fact that we'd asked the king to send his soldiers was never discussed. And yet that's the thing that saves us. Whereas in Alien, because almost all the games are just a one-shot or a two-shot, and actually there's not a massive amount of world building, it's much more an in-the-moment game. It makes sense to me that James might be playing and be like, oh, thankfully I have just the key card that we need to get through that kind of emergency moment. So yeah, this is difficult to integrate. I'm fascinated by this. What I would say, one of the problems with role-playing games, which has any kind of ability which is linked to intelligence, is it requires the real-life player, which doesn't require with any of the other abilities, to be intelligent in a way. When you're doing planning, like for instance, my character might be incredibly strong. I don't need to be incredibly strong to then knock down the door because I just roll the dice. An intelligent character would have good ideas, and to an extent, the player has to role play the good ideas. This is a good way of solving that, actually, which is, hey, my character's a genius. I'm not a genius. I didn't need to think of the idea. My character would have, though, and here we go. Here's the answer.
And you don't want to remove player agency. So
No.
say like there's a really high intelligence character and you're running the game and you know as the lore master there's this thing that you should do. I don't want to say to someone like, oh, here's the answer for your riddle. We should talk about riddles at some point in the future, because I found we did try putting riddles in at some point and I found it really hard to get it to be fun.
Yeah.
And that I guess it's like you roll an ability check, and if you roll a 25, and then I just say, oh, you suspect, but trying to drip that in. I don't know how successful that's been, because you want your players to be able to think about things and come up with good ideas. And also the flip of that is that if you're playing a very low intelligence character, a very low wisdom character, but you as a player of like, I've got a great idea.
Yeah.
And then you don't want the player to be sitting there being like, oh, I think I know what we should do, but I don't want to say it.
The grog conundrum.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is quite powerful. I would say it is a 13th level ability. So, and it's once per adventuring phase. So it's not like you can continually get from out of one scrape after another being like, don't worry, guys, I've sorted it.
Yeah.
It's more like literally that one moment that when you really most need it, something helps.
I suppose it speaks to what the class is about, the idea that someone who is intelligent and is prepared and has researched, which is kind of the idea of the scholar. All the things that you learn are the idea that you would put in the effort to learn them, like with hidden ways and hidden paths. It's not that you suddenly understand, oh, there might be hidden paths. It's that you're the sort of class who, as you were wandering through the world, would have actually, put that knowledge to good use.
We'll just run through quickly the last of the generic scholar abilities. So at level 15, Habits of the Wise, you can basically reuse an ability. So if you've got another ability to recharge in a long rest, you can spend inspiration to get a second use of it.
So you could use Hope Unlocked for twice at 15th level. I have to completely admit that.
Yeah.
At 15th
sent word to the dwarfs a week ago, and then later on you were like, and the elves. Words unspoken. At 17th level, you can convey your thoughts without speaking aloud, which is in the lore from Tolkien. You can deal with other high-level scholars, elves, Dunedain, and you can have a conversation speaking mind to mind, which is quite cool. And then at level 20, you can choose one intelligence or wisdom skill, and you automatically succeed at all ability checks using that skill. Also, you can spend inspiration to learn something completely hidden about your chosen lore, either by shrewd guess or seemingly chance insight. You learn a useful secret.
I mean, it's very Gandalf-y.
Yes.
Right? That's the other obvious thing to say about the scholar, is that there is a strong extent to which while you will not have his level of power, you are playing the role in the party that Gandalf played in both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
Yeah. And I think there is something magical about this. And that, we talked about, magic in Tolkien, and that there is magic around. And I think, linking that into the deep lore and, Valar and other things, there are ways in which it's probably slightly easier. Like say you're playing a high elf, I think it's very easy to justify some of these things. You're Noldor, you've been around for thousands of years. Like, of course you're going to have all these connections. For men, it's difficult, but then, there are examples. So Malbeth the Seer was a man who had visions and portents and lived in the kingdom of Arnor in Arthedain before it fell. So, there are examples of mortals that do get these higher powers and abilities. So, I think it does fit.
I just think that's a great moment, a great link to talk about one of the two other features that the Master Scholar gets in addition to the secret laws. So Dark Knowledge is a secret law, Ancient Law, which is more about history rather than the Shadow specifically, is a secret law, Birds and Beasts, the Natural World, Runes, and the Works of Elder Days, which I chose for the proficiencies. Anyway,
I haven't read these in ages. They're all, yeah,
so,
I've got like ideas for new characters.
At level 14, you get Deep Knowledge, which just gives you the ability to ask the Lore Master 3 questions about a thing for which they must provide truthful answers. Not necessarily complete answers, but truthful answers. However, at 18th level, you get words of command, which is kind of a big deal. This is the closest that rules is written. Any classes, there are, I think, cultural virtues that also are in this neighborhood, but I think the closest any classes get to being able to cast spells. So at 18th level, your mastery of law gives you authority over the world around you. Once per short rest, you may speak a word of command. When you do so, choose a target related to one of the secrets you have mastered, one of your secret laws, and make the appropriate skill check against the DC set by the lawmaster, typically at least a 20. If successful, you may give a short but irresistible command to your target. For example, ancient law, command a door made by the elves of Eregion to open. Birds and beasts, order a fearsome wolf to fly back to its den. Dark knowledge, command a wraith to return to its tomb. And so on and so forth.
Wow. I don't feel some of those things you've mentioned are quite on a par. I feel scaring a wolf away, okay, fine. Opening a door, that's pretty powerful. Scaring a wraith away feels...
Commanding a wraith.
That feels a level above some of the other things that we've talked about there.
I would point out that the reference point for word of command is from Barlin's tomb. This is not for or against. If anything, it supports what you're saying. From Barlin's tomb in Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf says, I had to speak a word of command to whatever presence was trying to force its way into the tomb. Yeah. So this is explicitly a reference to that.
Cool.
Wow. And actually, you have to make an ability check against a DC usually about 20. But at level 20, you automatically succeed an ability check. So then you just get the...
Thoughts about that.
Does that mean that you can just get the word of command to automatically succeed? That's great.
Well, I think I'm just conscious that we've been talking for a long time and there are things that we want to talk about still.
Let's move on and talk about virtues, the Barding.
I was going to say the same thing. Because there's actually something relevant. There's two things that are relevant in virtues to what we've just been talking about.
Okay, you go, James.
So let me find the right page. So as a Barding, as a one of the human cultures, you get a free virtue as a Barding. And the virtue I chose is Woeful Foresight. This raises your wisdom score by 1 point, which is one of the reasons I chose it. But also, you may invoke your power once per venturing phase. You may invoke your power of Woeful Foresight. When this happens, the Lawmaster should give you a relevant piece of information regarding adverse events likely to occur during your current adventure. If no such information is available, or the Lawmaster prefers not to divulge it, once before the current adventuring phase is over, you may choose to automatically succeed either an attack roll, a saving throw, or an ability check.
I completely forgot this was a cultural virtue, and I thought it was a scholar thing.
It's cultural virtue.
Yeah,
So I think that's interesting based on what we just talked about for two reasons. One, the retrieving a relevant piece of information from the future is almost like the mirror image of what we were talking about with regard to having made preparations in the past.
Yeah.
And also has the hilarious effect of forcing the Lawmaster to potentially have to pin down something that is probably going to happen, which I know has annoyed Callum in the past.
Has it come across as annoyed?
No, but you have expressed that there is a challenge to that.
There is a challenge. It's difficult because I'm trying to think of some of the visions you've had. So, for example, that troll that you fought, I think you got some foresight of that. I hope to have made it sufficiently vague. There was a thing where you went into the wastelands, the northeast of Dale.
Yes. And I had a vision, and because we did things differently than you expected, whatever happened didn't happen. Whatever I saw didn't happen.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that was because of the vision. It's one of these, I guess, back to the future, how does time travel work? Visions. If you see the vision, is it going to happen? Or
Indeed.
It's really interesting because I love DMing using like visions and dreams for things, not in a mechanical way, because I think if you give someone a vision or a dream, it doesn't need to happen or not, because the players will react to it and it helps them tell the story. So if they dream of something really ominous is going to happen the next night, that then informs the player choice, and they might change what they're going to do and they react to it. And it doesn't really matter whether that thing happens or not. The dream affects the story. But it feels like this with the class feature, or rather a virtue. It's a mechanical benefit that you need to get, and like you say, if you then don't go to that place because you've had woeful foresight about it, and that event doesn't happen, it's strange to get the mechanical benefit out of something. I'm not sure if I'm articulating this very well.
Yeah, I guess if I tell you about something bad and then you avoid the bad thing happening, that is a benefit.
You've still got a benefit from it.
Still got a benefit. Yeah, we've never played it as if the vision doesn't happen, then you get the automatic success. We've only ever played it as if you don't want to say anything, then only then do you get the automatic success, which has only happened a couple of times, including the time I used it in order to persuade the woodmen to give offerings to the eagles to try and create harmony in the valley, which whenever it's come up since, you've always talked around that.
Because there's a whole final lore about the woodmen don't like the eagles because the eagles come and steal their, livestock or animals, and so they have specific bows. And in I say the lore in the books, I don't know how much is that true to Tolkien's.
There's a mention of it in The Hobbit.
Yeah, so
I remember picking up on it last time I read.
It's quite a significant thing. Anyway, I'll leave that unsaid.
I think it's fair to say that a single role is not going to change an entire society. What it might do is open the possibility that some might consider there's another way of doing things, maybe.
And you've also picked up a couple of other barding cultural virtues.
I have, not always through leveling up, and this gets to one of those "what would you have done differently" things. The other one that I've picked up is King's Men, which gives you proficiency in broadswords, longswords, spears, and great bows, or two of those. You get +1 to a bonus to attacks with those weapons. So Callum was nice enough to let me train to get that, or let Torwald train to get that virtue over the course of 2 fellowship phases.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. Like you committed to it, and you had to train with the King's Men and Dale.
Yes, but if I had designed the character with what I know now from the start, that probably would have been my starting virtue. So that, combined with a more, shall we say, traditionally strong set of ability scores, Torwald will at least have been not great at combat, but competent at combat from the start. So he would never get multiple attacks, but the one attack that he did do would likely be effective. And I probably would have had dexterity rather than wisdom as my second highest modifier. I think it would have changed the character quite dramatically, because I think he would have come in as a slightly more, it probably would have made sense for him to be slightly older. And I think he would have had a bit more self-assurance and almost more of a hard edge, to be honest. I think he would have been a character who comes in or being able to use a stick and a knife versus a character who is very skilled with a sword and a bow. Those are different characters. And I think there was something a little bit Frodo-ish about Torwald in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison.
And I think if I had taken King's Men, he would have been more Faramir-ish, if that makes sense.
That's an interesting comparison.
And I maybe would have loved playing that character, but it would have been a different character.
What are the ability scores that you had at the beginning?
Pull away the curtain.
I didn't think to keep my original level 1 character sheet. I do it.
I mean,
now
why would you? To be honest,
well, I do it now for all.
Do you now?
My
Do you photograph them or download them? Or?
I just have it on a PDF, but not for necessarily for D&D 5 characters on D&D Beyond, because it's so easy on that to reconfigure things and
play
around. But when it's AIM and you're using Roll20 and using PDFs, and I like to have the original version in case I mess up and it's harder to fix. But obviously, his strength was 8. I can tell you what his stats are now at level 8, just before we level up to 9. His strength is 8, his dexterity is 12, so that's a +1 modifier to dex, not fantastic. 10 constitution, it's amazing he's still alive, really. Yep. Intelligence, thanks to that ring that we found, is now 20.
He is a genius.
Wisdom is 16 +3, and charisma is 14 +2. So he's really good with the mental stats and terrible with the physical stats. It creates a very different character.
It does. You could have had a more traditionally balanced character, and I think you're right. Roleplay wise, he would have come out quite differently, and his impact on the party would have been very different.
Indeed.
I actually have the original character sheet for Torwald, and I also just found all the printouts from all the character sheets initially. Do you know how we were talking about Theodric? The Theodric at level 1 had an armor class of 8 and 10 hit points.
We made some choices, Josh.
He was an old man. Yeah, he was just an old man who walked around the world, and it is a miracle that he survived. He survived partly with Torwald's help. And I think Torwald survived partly with Theodric's help.
Especially earlier on, before we got more marshals in the party.
Yeah, Torwald's starting ability scores at level 1 were strength of 8, dex of 12, con of 9,
Whoa.
Intelligence of 16, wisdom of 16, charisma of 13.
I mean, I love it. I'm not like a min-max or a power game or anything. I love it, and it's informed a really interesting
7
character.
hit points.
You could have been a more balanced character, and you wouldn't be as smart now as you could have been, but you would have been better in combat. But you would never have been like the boy genius who helped the party solve puzzles.
Yes, there's a difference. And I like how it has helped shape the party. And it feels like, again, if he had that harder edge, not that, family was hard edged or anything, but it just he would have held himself further apart from maybe the rest of the party. There wouldn't have been as much camaraderie maybe early on of the party going, I guess we need to take care of this guy.
Yeah.
Is that less hit points than a commoner?
Yes.
Commoner NPC stat. So I'm conscious that we've talked for a very long time about Torwald.
Lots of things.
And we have some more questions for you. Maybe Josh could pose some questions.
I think we've touched on the first question I had for you, so we can maybe wrap it up with any final thoughts, which is looking back now, 2 years on, dozens of sessions later, years in game, is there anything you would do differently from the beginning? Is there anything that current James would say to past James and would say to new players about creating a scholar?
Give him a higher AC and higher con, for God's sake. I know we just said it would have been different and maybe not as distinctive, but I know what I like playing as now. It's more from that perspective. I like to just have a little bit more functionality in combat.
Yeah, it's not a huge part of the game, but I do feel for you because at this point, level 8, everyone else is like slaying orcs and felling goblins and multiple attacks and these abilities. And then Torwald hits once with his broadsword and misses.
He usually hits with the broadsword.
Well, that's true. He hits with the broadsword.
Extra +1. Because between his cultural virtue and the fact that the broadsword is a dwarven broadsword, he gets an extra +2 on that attack, which almost brings him up to a level of, competence.
Yeah, I've been quite generous in terms of giving you things to help in combat because even if we make you're still not going to do a huge amount of damage with it. So
that's true. He gets a +3 to damage on top of the die. So yeah, it's not a lot. Oh, sorry, no, a +2 because the King's Men doesn't actually give you damage; it only gives you a +1 to hit. So he only gets a +2 on the damage die. So
he pitches in.
He pitches in.
He does his
it does make it feel like when you get the kill or you do something, it feels impactful.
Yes, I mostly just try and give other people advantage. Because we use the flanking rules.
Maybe a final question. What are some favorite Torwald moments in the story?
Okay. Yes, I was thinking about this. And number one has to be the moment I like to call Brave Sir Torwald.
Oh, yes.
Which is when we, the ambushers, became the ambushees after we tracked
It went
this.
so badly.
After we tracked this bandit group to a crossroads and decided, well, yes, we know there's 20 of them, but they can't be all right here right now, can there? And yes, they were all there right then. So we attacked. We did pretty well under the circumstances, but there was a point where it was clear that things were going quite badly, and it just became obvious that the best thing for Torwald to do was not be there anymore. Not in a cowardly way, I would like to think, but just in a calculation of, if I'm not good at fighting, if I stay, I can't help anyone. But if I leave, then I can come back later, maybe free them if they're prisoners, go get help, not abandon the party, but not go down with the ship either. Yeah. And so Torwald bolted, because he just made the calculation that was the best help he could give the party, was to help them later rather than die now. And he drew away at least one, if not two, of the bandits, which gave space for Scott's character, I think, primarily, but also Runan. I think most of the rest of the party were down by that point, but it let Karhu and Runan have some breathing room, and they were able to. I think one of the things it did was it prevented someone from being flanked. I think it's one of the things that happened.
It was one of these moments where it was so close to combat, to a TPK, the closest that had been the whole time. I think Josh, your character went down in like the second round of combat or something.
And my character at the time, Halmir, who's my second character,
was our tank, or one of our tanks.
A marshal, a soldier of Gondor. He went down first. The scales tipped so quickly.
And we had another warrior as well, didn't we?
We had another warrior.
We had another warrior. He went down second, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, it was real bad.
Actually, this is a memorable moment for me. It's a great example because if you had rewound to the beginning and you'd actually balanced Torwald up a bit more from the start, and he had a slightly better con, and he was a bit better in combat, he probably wouldn't have run away, and we almost certainly would all have died, because he would have been a more rounded character. He wouldn't have had that, no, running is clearly the best option, which it was. And I don't think any of us thought in character he's being cowardly. It was, well, we're all going to die and he can get away. That seems totally normal.
He saved the
party. And I think
party.
it would have been different. You did totally save the party by playing your character.
But by running away.
But by playing your character.
Yes. Yes.
I had a couple of favorite moments from a player watching.
Okay, I have two more, but can you give me one of yours?
Alternate. They may be the same.
Let's alternate, in case one of yours is one of mine.
Well, one of mine is more to do with the relationship between Torwald and Halmir, who's my second character who took over from Phaedra. We'll talk about him in more depth in a future episode. He's a soldier of Gondor, though, and part of his kind of backstory was that he was supposed to be a scholar in Gondor, and he turned away from that to be a soldier. And for me, that was because I played a scholar as my first class and I wanted to pivot away. It was just a kind of quirk for me. But because of that, he and Torwald always had quite an interesting dynamic. I think Halmir saw Torwald as kind of what he might have been if he had followed a different path. And he kind of liked it, but found it frustrating. I think he saw some of the qualities he didn't like in himself in Torwald, and he found that frustrating, but he also felt a kind of arm around the shoulder. And I liked that we quickly built up an idea that, well, there's a great library in Minas Tirith, which you knew about and I knew about, and that we've always had this sort of sunset story that we've mentioned in role play around campfires and stuff, that, one day our characters together could go to the library at Minas Tirith. And it's not happened yet, but I really like that that's kind of their connection. And I think of their dynamic like that, as kind of two sides of a coin, and that they maybe have somewhere they could end up together.
Have you ever seen it? The White City?
Save it. We'll use this. We'll use this when we go.
Okay, that was a really lovely description of the power of RP and the the connections that are forged between characters. Can I tell you about my next choice?
Please.
Okay, I'm sure it's lovely as well.
The bat fight.
The bat fight.
The bat fight. Remember the bat fight, guys?
Yes, very much so.
Specifically, the moment where Torwald was physically lifted up by a bat. I can't remember how far into the air. 20 feet.
Quite far. It was a war bat of Gundabad. So
A war bat of Gundabad.
Yeah.
And my immediate in-character comment was, I never read about anything like this happening before. For which Callum gave a rare inspiration.
It was such a great moment because it felt like, yep, obviously this is going to happen to Torwald. We're fighting this heroic battle against these great bats. Oh, he's been lifted up. He's going to fall to his death.
So Callum gave me inspiration, which my next turn, I immediately used to attack the bat and got a natural 20.
Fantastic.
And got it to drop me. I can't remember if it died or not, but I think Callum ruled that I got it to drop me. So just in combination of the moments in which Torwald has actually hit with his sword and done something effective, that is my favorite one of those.
The first time you used, because that sword, the story of how you got that sword was essentially, and I'm not sure around this
for another time.
Maybe
It's
that's
quite a long story.
Yeah, quite a long story. But the first time you ever used a sword in combat, I think you got a natural 20 and killed something.
That's also true. I think you're right.
That was a pretty cool moment.
So I love that sword. But do you have another? You said you had a couple, Josh. Do you have another favorite moment or not? Or was it more of a?
One of them is one we've actually mentioned. It was back at the City of the Aether. It was when I was Theodric and you were Torwald, and we were debating. I'd written this down beforehand as one of my favorite memories because I thought it showed the difference between two scholars of Theodric being like, I know the world, I know it's dangerous, whereas your view was there might be knowledge down there. And I thought to myself,
there might be something interesting.
I know it's dangerous, we're not going. And I really enjoyed how that all played out. And it informed our relationship that followed, which I think there was a kind of grudging respect between the two. And I think we kind of met in the middle slightly.
Yes.
After Runin nearly got
because we were both right.
We were both right, and I think it maybe took a near-death experience for our friend to
afterwards, everyone was like, "We should have listened to Theodric." But also, you got so much information and stuff
that has come in handy later, the map.
It has to be fair.
The map, yeah.
And
I really wanted you to go inside because I'd prepped all this cool stuff.
And we found that.
Of course, they'll want to go in because it's a game and you want to explore everything, and that's my mentality. Whereas everyone was like, "We don't want to die." Like, oh yeah, that's also a reason.
But we found that cool saddle.
Oh yeah, that's now hanging up in a bar.
Is that hanging? Is that in the bar in Stonyford?
It's at the bar in Stonyford. There's going to be a Stonyford episode, right? There's going to be an episode that's just about Stonyford.
We need to talk about Stonyford. Yes. So much to say about Stonyford.
James, to see us out, why don't you give us a lasting Torwald memory? So,
I think you've said previously, Josh, that for a long time it felt like the main character of the party was Kahu, Scott's character. And that sort of reached a peak when we met a significant character from his past. I don't know why I'm talking about this if we can't give spoilers for a campaign that hasn't been recorded and no one else can see. Kahu's sister. I'm talking about it as if it's an episode of Critical Role. That's what I'm doing. So we finally tracked down Kahu's sister. Who didn't know she was Kahu's sister. That was a whole thing. And we figured it out. She didn't really know who she actually was. And there was a long debate with her, trying to persuade her to potentially see that she had maybe been brainwashed by a cult leader.
Yeah.
And I just remember it as a great party moment. Everyone in the party sort of contributing their perspective, trying to support Kahu. And there was just very naturally, it's going to sound really cheesy, taking it out of that context, because it came about very naturally in the moment, and then it's going to sound like a CW superhero show or something like that, saying it out of context. But there was one point where someone, it may not have been told, challenged her on this kind of blood warrior, rageful approach to the world, death-seeking kind of sort of classic barbarian archetype approach to things. And Callum had her say something sort of off the cuff in the moment along the lines of, the only thing that matters is how you die. To which I had Torwald respond, no, the only thing that matters is how you live. Which just felt like a very satisfying payoff, not to just what Torwald had been trying to argue for in that encounter, that social encounter, that conversation, but what the whole party had been trying to together articulate. And what I like about it as a moment is it felt like it was this just moment of everything just falling into place.
It felt like all the threads came together in that conversation at that one moment.
All the threads of that conversation came together in that one moment.
I don't know, when you design a character and you know, but linking them into Kahu's path, and you might have killed her and never known, or found out later on. I think for me as a lore master, that was probably the NPC player interaction, which when I've run the best. I don't know how you feel, but afterwards I felt like that went really well. Like, it was impactful. People really cared because there was a connection to one of the player characters, and there was this tension. And also I felt like I managed to get into that mindset of how would someone be, and you guys did a brilliant job. And we're talking about Torwald, and James is very good at this, in just picking apart the bullshit of this character's worldview and convincing her. And that was a moment where it was like all RP. I don't think there was really any skill. There was maybe some skill checks involved, but that was sort of summed up her game, I guess, that bit about, family and the themes that were going on. A good moment to maybe wrap up our Torwald discussion.
I think so.
Wonderful. I feel we've covered a lot. I have loved learning about Torwald's backstory. I loved the stuff about the library. I'm now going to have to look back at my notes and think about what my observations were. But Scholar, Torwald's curiosity, and I suppose it leaves us with the question of the shadow, which we can talk about next time.
The shadow encroaches. Thanks very much for joining us, James. No emails except on party business. And comments, suggestions, and questions to thefellowshipphase@gmail.com. The long year turns to its close. Much we have accomplished these last seasons. Our fellowship disbands, but is not broken, and we will return
on the next episode of The Fellowship Phase.